This is Natasha Helper Parker, and this is Mormon Sex Info. Believe it or not, I'm back, people. It's been a while. I know this because I've gotten a few complaints, which I don't blame you. I have not done a Mormon Sex Info podcast in a while. So I'm just going to ask for forgiveness. I've been moving, for those of you who don't know. So the last 6 months have been very full in my life, and just, life is life. So for those of you who've supported me along the way with your yearly donations and all that, thank you. And I hope you'll continue to do so. We plan to have lots of new content here in 2020, which gets me kind of to tonight's topic, which is I'm interviewing the fabulous, the one and only Lisa Butterworth, who I have invited to actually be a co-host with me here on Mormon Sex Info. So she will be bringing on interviewees and guests for the show, and the two of us are hoping to create a lot of content for this program. Lisa is in the process of becoming certified as a sex therapist, and she also works for my online practice and in-office practice, Symmetry Solutions, which she does out of Boise, Idaho, and she's just really phenomenal. So I'm excited to have you get to know her if you don't already do. She was the founder of Feminist Mormon Housewives blog many years ago, when kind of the blogosphere was just starting. And that's developed into a very rich community that she, I hope, can take a lot of credit for and hope she feels proud of. Anyway, hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
So glad to have you here.
Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, why don't you spend a little bit of time just introducing yourself? Tell us about you, a little bit more than what I have, and your background and what you're interested in and kind of your work, et cetera.
Absolutely. So I am a licensed professional counselor here in Boise, Idaho. I was a housewife, which makes the name of Feminist Mormon Housewives true, for I think about 16 years. I did the Mormon mom thing. And then I went back to grad school. And now my kids are sort of older teenagers and adults. And I'm really glad I went back to school, because this is a really fulfilling job and I love it. I absolutely love it. I can't even tell you how much I love having people come to me. And, people will often ask me, like, is it hard listening to people's problems every day? And I don't know if you find it hard. I definitely think it's emotionally draining, but I don't really find it hard. It almost feels like a gift, like people are inviting me into their lives and into their worlds, and I get to learn. I'm endlessly curious about people's thoughts and experiences, and I get to hear all kinds of interesting, fascinating, beautiful, hard, glorious stories. So I love it. I love my job.
Well, I love that you love your job. I feel similarly. Yeah, it is, I think, a draining job. And sometimes, emotional self-care is important as mental health providers, but overall, it's an honor and a privilege to get to work in this field for sure. All right. So for those of you who are wondering, just a few things about Mormon Sex Info before we get started on our discussion. So we've done a huge renovation. We've done a huge renovation of the website. We created a new website so that it would be easier, more user-friendly. And you can now find Mormon Sex Info podcast at mormonsex.info. So that's the new website where you can get all the latest interviews. And also, we have been creating an iTunes version of Mormon Sex Info, so you can now subscribe to it. That comes out with all of the archived type of sessions. So you can find new ones either here on Facebook Live or on the mormonsex.info page, and you can, slowly catch up with Mormon Sex Info through the iTunes podcast, it's about a year behind what we're currently doing now. All excellent interviews. We've really created some wonderful content, lots of great interviewees, lots of nationally renowned people, authors, etc. So really proud of the work that we're doing here. Please help make this podcast sustainable. And you can do that by offering a donation. So kind of the yearly suggested donation is $35 a year to get all the access. Some of the podcasts, if you want them, will kind of come at a cost, like $1.25 to download. If you want them through the website, some are free. So you just kind of have to go look. But regardless, eventually all of the content will be free because we're putting it up on iTunes. So the only way that we can get support to help me pay people like Lisa's time and also the editor that edits everything and puts everything up for us, that all comes at a cost, plus the website, all of those things. So we can't really do this in a sustainable way without your financial support. If you can't financially support us for whatever reason, you can help us market. That's always a free way to help support us. So you can share our videos or tell your friends about it. Post things on Facebook about us, etc. Like our page, give us a review, which we're happy to get any type of review just because any feedback is helpful. So those are all ways that you can support Mormon Sex Info. All right, so let's get started with tonight's topic. So I basically just wanted to introduce you as kind of the new co-host. And since you're going to be co-hosting Mormon Sex Info, you're probably going to be starting to look for people to interview. And so I thought we would pick your brain, Lisa, on what are some of the conversations you wish we were having in kind of the Mormon community, either more often or in a different way than we currently have. And so I thought I'd give you just kind of a platform to share, 3 to 5 kind of bullet points of things that you think would be important to start addressing in a more sex positive or sexual health type of direction.
Well, before I do answer that question, I just wanted to say that I just wanted to support what you said about there being a lot of really amazing interviews already in the archives. Like every time I read a new book that's sort of like the new hot thing, or the book that everybody refers to in the sex therapy world, Natasha's like, oh yeah, I interviewed them for Mormon Sex Info. Like she has all the connections. She's talked to all the people. Like there's just not a better collection of podcast interviews, I think, with experts out there. I mean, I'm just really impressed by what you put together, Natasha.
Well, thank you. That's so nice of you. You know what I think is funny about it? I think that when I reach out to a lot of the people, because a lot of these people are like really important people that I would think would ignore an email from little old me. But I think that they're really excited to talk to our audience. I don't think that, there's a lot of ways that sometimes, nationally renowned authors and people who are really excited about sexual health know how to reach more maybe conservative or religious audiences. And so I think that they're excited to talk to kind of, the spectrum of Mormonland. So
yeah,
I give a lot of credit to just our community for people being willing to talk to me.
For sure. Yeah. So one of the things that came to mind to me that I would love to sort of like find people and interview is I would love to do some interviews and some discussions around, some of the medical side of women's reproductive health and sexual health. I recently read a blog post by an OBGYN who was very upset by the fact that the University of Utah offers sort of premarital exams, right? And, like her critique was that, the assumption that people won't have sex until they're married, or that there's some specific, like exam that you would need in order to, and the way that sort of caters to the patriarchy, she was really upset by. And I thought that was a really interesting point of view. And also, I feel like it would be interesting to maybe challenge that a little. And, like if you have a group of people for whom this feels like a valuable service, is there a way to sort of help them frame it, but still maybe offer the service, but frame it in a way that's more sex positive? And so, like I would love to interview some OBGYNs. I would love to, get some of that medical information. Some of the best sex health things that I feel like I've gone to have been run by OBGYNs. So I feel like, ones that really know what they're doing have a lot of really good information. And I just feel like I often feel, even with all the training that I've had so far, often feel a little bit mystified by the hormones and the, like the physiological things that are happening with sex and orgasm and reproduction. And I feel like that would be, especially, like in a Mormon setting where motherhood and womanhood is so interconnected, like really exploring that in a sex positive way to support, the medical side of it. That would be a really good conversation that I'd love to have.
I really love that. And I love even you're thinking about how we balance that bridge between respecting kind of cultural kind of norms or values or ideas, while at the same time marrying that a little bit more with the flexibility that sex positivity wants there to be, for kind of a general audience, that not everybody fits those ideals or lives up to those values in any given community or standards per se. There's a difference too between having certain values and especially religiously based sexual values, and then whether or not behavior matches that and standards. We have a lot of that in Mormonism. So it's a complex kind of thing to navigate. So I think that would be great to bring in more discussion around that, especially around, I think when you're talking about OBGYN experiences, we have the gamut of female sexuality from, starting menstruation and when girls or young women go on birth control, which can be, a difficult conversation, how marriage plays into that, assumptions that are made about whether or not you're a virgin or not a virgin, or what virginity even means. And there's just a lot of room there. Plus, of course, the life cycle of everything else that goes along with female kind of anatomy and reproduction and baby making and all that stuff. So that's a huge component, is the female life cycle, just in regards to sexuality.
Well, and speaking of that, I personally would love, especially given my time of life, I would love to get more people who are experts on menopause and perimenopause. I feel like just as a group, as a whole, older Mormon women are almost not even acknowledged as existing, right? Like the fact that, we're done being mothers and then we disappear, then we, if we're not Relief Society president or, do the, it's often maybe that shifts to the role of grandmothering, but, we're all a lot more than a mother or a grandmother. And, what are these effects of perimenopause on our sexuality and our sexual experiences? I mean, a lot of women, I think, have really positive, exciting experiences, in their 40s and 50s and 60s as far as sexuality goes. And I think another area just sort of mirroring that is for men, because they experience a lot of sexual changes in their 40s, 50s, and 60s as well. And there are, a lot of expectations about what male sexuality is supposed to look like. And that often has to shift at that age, right? Like you can't expect a 60-year-old man to perform the same way a 20-year-old man performs, but that doesn't mean you can't have an enjoyable sexual life. And I think a lot of men give up on having a sexual life as they age, because they want their sexuality to arrive in this way that has sort of been prescribed by manhood, and they miss out on a lot of pleasure that they could have in their lives, because they feel like their sexuality should perform in a certain kind of way. And that if we can open ourselves up to different kinds of experiences and ways of enjoying our sexuality as we age, that we can have a lot more fun and pleasure in our lives.
Well, I love that topic as well. I also am in that stage of life and have become more curious about what's coming and what I should expect and what's the best ways to self-care to prepare for these kinds of changes. And I agree that it's not just a Mormon issue where sexuality kind of disappears as people age. And I think that the baby boomer generation has really challenged that. And so we're starting to see a lot more research. We're starting to see a lot more kind of books and resources, available for people, to age in a way that their sexuality is still very much an integral part of their lives. So I think that would be a great kind of topic to bring definitely a lot of people to the table with as far as talking to. So that's lovely. Awesome. All right. What else? What else are there? Are there topics in kind of when you think about just having grown up Mormon and being kind of part of the Mormon community. And, both you and I are very connected kind of with the spectrum of Mormonism, from believing members to progressive members to post members. A lot of our work has to do with a lot of people all over the spectrum. What are some of the typical challenges that you see people facing, or maybe messages we grew up with that need some help to be reframed in more positive ways, et cetera?
Well, I mean, one of the big ones, obviously, is the effect that worthiness interviews have on people's sexuality, right? Like, that's always just a huge topic for Mormons because, I feel like I had almost the ideal sort of situation growing up. I never had sort of inappropriate questions or, shaming sort of behavior in the bishops that I had interactions with in worthiness interviews. And there was definitely opportunity for them to treat me that way, right? Like, I was not perfect, but even in an ideal situation, like, I feel like I really did experience the ideal. There was a lot of harm that was done. And, and I know that if I felt like there was harm done in my experiences, that the ideal, right? Like, and I think it would be interesting, like, I'm sure it's a topic that you've covered a lot, but just bringing in people to tell their stories, and maybe also bringing in other therapists who deal with a lot of Mormons to talk about ways that we can interact with bishops and stake presidents and our children, to prepare them if we feel like, in our family system, and different ways to sort of, like, if we are wanting to engage in Mormonism as far as worthiness interviews, how can we minimize the damage and maybe call out the damage when we feel comfortable doing so? I mean, I feel like that there's just no way to overstate how huge that is. I feel like I have just so many clients who come in with just stories that are abhorrent, just not best case scenario stories that, like, in any other context would be seen as almost sexual abuse. And somehow we accept the behavior as normal and even godly. And not that we accept the behavior as godly, but we just, I think that we have a really hard time. Well, and this is another topic that I think would be really important to talk about, like consent, right? Like, we as Mormons have really difficult time with boundaries and feeling like, like we can say no to things. And it never occurred to me as a young woman that I could say no to questions my bishop asked me, or that I had, it just never even occurred to me. And similarly, I think figuring out what consent looks like in a Mormon marriage, right? Like, just because two people are married doesn't mean that the sex is consensual. Not that, like, that's the typical experience, but when you sort of make a framework that says sex inside marriage is okay, always, like, having a discussion about, like, when isn't it? Like, and not from the framework of, sort of like prescribing what people can and can't do in their sex lives, but just like, what does healthy sexuality really look like inside the framework of marriage? And that just because you're married doesn't mean it's healthy, doesn't mean it's okay. Like, if they're, and I can't tell you how many clients I've had where sort of the woman's lack of a sense that she could say no to sex completely kills her desire for it, to the point that, like, like, marriages end. And how, like, and not only, and often the men aren't meaning to do anything non-consensual, but there's just no words within our framework for, like, having a discussion of what creating desire looks like and what consent looks like. And so I think that would be a fascinating discussion too.
Well, I think those are awesome topics, and very pertinent to the population we're wanting to reach. I think, with your first thought about worthiness interviews, that's an example of tradition, married with a lot of kind of, religious kind of loyalty and things of that nature that make it difficult for any community to change or shift something that they feel has been a part of how things have been done forever and are aligned with some of their religious beliefs. And at the same time, when there are things that we know are harmful that are happening that contribute to things like sexual shame and a lot of even kind of subconscious problems that people may not even realize are affecting them, that's very difficult to know how to have conversations in a way where people aren't going to be like either one saying, well, we can't even listen to this because this is anti or this is against, our beliefs, versus also the other spectrum, which is like, the church always does bad and the church is bad, and so it's kind of like we want to be able to have these conversations in ways where we can elevate the conversation to something a little bit more sophisticated where we stay away from either or thinking, because usually that doesn't help really anybody other than, kind of polarized conversations. We want to open conversations and explore conversations and look at ways that we can still value our belief systems, our values, our standards without necessarily causing unintentional harm, or at least being aware of the types of issues that people are concerned about. So that's a tricky balance always. So I'm excited to invite you to this process because it's one that I have that I have tried to maneuver, I'm sure, sometimes well, sometimes not so well, in this work that we're doing, where we care for and honor our faith traditions, and at the same time, we come at it from a mental health perspective and a sex positive perspective, and we want good results for people, which kind of gets to your second point, which is helping people have good sex, good relationships, good intimacy, all of those things, and especially their marital relationships, which, we deem fairly important in our culture. So how do we make sure that these things that we value aren't inadvertently getting in the way and actually even harming things that we want, right? So that's always complex too. So anyway, I'm really excited. I'm so excited to have you be a part of this. I'm super excited for your thought process and the people that you'll attract as far as bringing them onto the program. I am excited to see what kinds of things you're wanting to focus on. And I just want to make sure I leave time here for any final thoughts from you.
Well, I have one other thing that I was
awesome.
really thinking about that I would love to talk about. I feel like I have quite a few sort of older single especially, clients. And I would love to do some exploration of what it looks like to have, to navigate the world of being an older, single Mormon person in a body that is sexual, and maybe navigating the pull between sort of what your body wants and needs and what, maybe your values or your beliefs are asking of you, and maybe approaching some different people in that stage of life and seeing how they navigate that and how they interpret different things. And I think getting a wide range of people who maybe do it differently would be really interesting.
Boy, I love that too. That's a topic that comes up a lot when people ask about, kind of the main complaint is, why am I being expected to act like a 15-year-old? It's kind of like I'm treated like a 15-year-old with the same kinds of boundaries and standards when I'm 40 or 50 or 65. And it's complex too, because, although it's easy to think about sex happening within a marital kind of framework, marital frameworks are complex from many other perspectives, legal perspectives, financial perspectives, and people may be at certain points of their life where they're either raising children as a single parent or dealing with other types of family situations where maybe marriage isn't a good fit. And yet, like you're saying, sexuality is still there. and maybe people have interest for relationships or romance and maybe not in a marital construct. So that's a real dilemma that a lot of people, find themselves in. And, there's when there's a dilemma, it can feel like either way there's loss. If you marry when you don't feel prepared to marry, or when you don't marry, but maybe do become sexual and then you feel guilt or shame or those kinds of things. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing to navigate for a lot of people. So I'm super glad that you're going to come aboard and help me normalize a lot of these situations. And to your point, I think there's lots of ways people navigate their Mormon kind of either beliefs or practices, or even as they potentially leave Mormonism, as some people do, they're still in many ways formulating things kind of through the Mormon lens that they grew up with. And so those are all things that I think will be interesting to explore with you on this show.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think it's going to be great.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Mormon Sex Info, Lisa Butterworth. And I hope you've all enjoyed this little kind of introduction of, I think, a pretty fabulous person that you're going to get to know a little bit better through this venue. And again, for those who want to support Mormon Sex Info, please go to mormonsex.info. There's lots of ways to donate. Suggested donation is $35 a year, but there's lots of other ways to donate, even if you can just throw a few bucks our ways. A few hundred people do that, and it makes a huge difference. And share these podcasts with other people as well that you might think would benefit, and give us ideas and feedback as to maybe topics you'd like for us to discuss. Feel free to comment on Facebook Live events like this one, or ask questions so it can be interactive. Anyway, we're just excited to move forward with 2020 and the goals that we have. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
We took the long road home, turned minutes into miles, and as the evening traveled on, the sunset bathed your smile. We stopped beneath the desert stars, wrapped in each other's arms. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth.
It's been a long road here, a trail with tears, pain and sorrow too.
But through every storm we traveled on, like lovers do. And if sometimes we fell apart, we always came back home. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth. Some people say love is blind and forever is too long. But I see your eyes in every sunrise. Can't imagine life alone. Let's take the long road on together until we're gone. Want you by my side till the day I die and into the beyond. It It's as simple as our love is. That's how I wanna go, all wrapped up in the arms of our extraordinary, it's nothing ordinary love. Ordinary.
Ordinary.
No, it's extraordinary.